Hello and welcome back to Whose Power Rankings Is It Anyway? Yes, the place where it's all made up and the power rankings don't matter. Yes, they just don't matter, okay? We're having a good time, we're talking about the teams, and now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of this season and our 2021 power rankings, because so far we've talked a lot about newer teams with newer players coming in, and it's a lot harder to rate these players because we don't have as much of a sample size, we don't know how they're going to synergize. But now we're getting into the top end, and for the most part, when you look at the top end of the Overwatch League, generally veteran players and veteran teams that are just coming back once again. So we need to break it down because I know it's controversial right now. There's a little bit of back and forth, and we're going to start with the most controversial one because a lot of you guys in the comments of the YouTube videos have been like, hey, how are you overrating this team so hard? And it's going to be the Philadelphia Fusion. And I don't get this sentiment. I really don't. I don't understand where this whole Philly should be A tier, Philly should be worse than a lot of these other teams, all these kind of things. I don't really know why so many people have had that mindset. Let's look at the roster and we can break down bit by bit my opinions of why this is, why this is the right call and why I think you guys might be a little bit wrong on this one. So for the DPS lineup of the Philadelphia Fusion, we haven't seen a ridiculous amount of change, but enough to really make you go, wow, I actually think this is a much needed improvement. We have Carpe and EQO coming in. And actually, before we go into all of this, I am going to analyze this team as if they are not going to have massive amounts of visa issues. Obviously, they picked up Rascal under the assumption that maybe EQO will struggle to play, at least any time recently, with all the COVID situation. But apparently, Funny Astro and Shockwave, just European countries in general, are having issues getting visas to these Korean regions, which Philadelphia Fusion is playing from. They're playing in the East this season. So I'm disregarding that. I'm assuming that the players are going to be able to play because as soon as you start bringing in those factors, it's impossible to really put them somewhere. The DPS lineup is Carpe and EQO, a tried and true classic. EQO I haven't been as impressed by. Obviously, he had that insane Genji series and meta when that happened in the Summer Showdown last season. But for the most part, we didn't really see him. And I assume that is because something is up with the coaches. He's not in form. Hard to really know because we don't get a lot of feedback on that sort of situation. But EQA didn't really play a whole lot. So I am glad that they have picked up Rascal, and to a lot of people's excitement, including Johnny's, Rascal is going to be joining the Philadelphia Fusion, which is a phenomenal DPS duo. When you look at just Carpe and Rascal on paper, they have so much covered. And I think one of the biggest weaknesses of Carpe, especially last season, is I feel like they were struggling to find a hero that Carpe could play. Like, you always want Carpe on that hit scan and the Widow, but it felt like Hisu and Ivy couldn't play Tracer as well, so therefore they wanted to put Carpe on the Tracer, which then required Hisu to go to the hit scan, which just, it didn't look comfortable, especially in the final hours. He just couldn't match up with the best. So I really love seeing Carpe come in with a DPS duo who will have a lot more flexibility like Rascal, but then you also add Shockwave, who in my opinion was just the shining light of the Vancouver Titans. He was so good. Honestly, Vancouver Titans were really bad last season until they picked up Shockwave. And every time I watched him play, it was just like, he can't keep getting away with it. He can't keep playing this aggressive and killing everybody and not getting punished. But he did it time and time again with a pretty weak roster behind him. And he was just doing it against some of the best players in the world. And I think you need to give more credit to Shockwave's name when you are talking about coming into a superstar roster like the Philadelphia Fusion with so many great players behind it. I really want to see Shockwave step into the limelight and really perform now that he has like Carpe, Rascal next to him. He has the backline of Alarm, Funny Astro. Just think about how much easier the game is going to get when you have those tools behind you. So I'm excited to see Shockwave really step into that. The full DPS lineup of EQO, Carpe, Shockwave, Rascal, I don't know why people aren't rating this higher. It is so good. It is flexible. It has everything covered. I think I'm really happy with everything I see. The one weakness I've sort of talked about is the Sombra. Who plays Sombra on this team? I have no idea. Honestly, this is just an aggressive team across the board. None of their play, and we haven't seen any of them really play Sombra very well. So I'm excited to see how that happens and how that adapts if Sombra does become very prevalent in the meta like we saw last season for a bit. So there is that glaring weakness. Hopefully they'll be able to overcome it. They have a lot of talented players. Will they be able to find a way above that solution? Okay, going on to the tank line, and this is where I think a lot of people, their justifications are made sense when they're rating Philadelphia Fusion lower, but I disagree with it. Poco is coming in to play the mainstay of the off tank instead of instead of Fury. Fury is now off the team, and now Poco doesn't have to trade time. We did see bits of Poco. We saw mainly Fury, if I'm remembering correctly, last season. But I think Poco looked comparable to Fury for the most part. Obviously, I think you can make arguments for different heroes. Like Poco's Diva is incredible, but a very different style to the way Fury plays it. Who played the Sigma better? There's a lot of back and forth, but I don't think you can disregard that Poco is a phenomenal off tank. And I think he has a ton of flexibility in that as well. So I don't think this is a downgrade. I think this is more of a side grade. I don't think Poco is better than Fury, but I think it's, he's been on the team forever. He's been there since the 2018 season when they went to the finals. I think Poco has a lot of pre-existing synergy, and I think he's just a great player. And I bet he's hungry to play and take that main role as well. And then we go over to the main tank, and we now have Mano instead of Sato. And there's just a lot of O's in this team, and it's very confusing, but keep up with me. So Mano coming from the NYXL is a weird one, because NYXL were a team that sort of struggled last season, and it's hard to really know if Mano was still at the place that he was in 2018 when he was one of the best main tanks, best Winstons in the world. I'm curious to see if he still has that, and he has that flexibility that Sato brought, right? Obviously, Sato's had an up and down career on the Philadelphia Fusion, but for the most part, if you asked anyone, last season he played incredibly well, and he was a great player. So it is interesting seeing Philly go in a different direction and picking up Mano. I think this is another side grade. I don't think it's a downgrade. I don't think it's an upgrade. I think it's just a different style, and I think both can be said for both of these tank players. And I'm excited to see how it's going to come together for them, because I like that they're changing some things up. Obviously, they had a phenomenal season. I think they were first in the regular season. But in the final hours, when they had to play against all of the best teams in the world and they all traveled together, they fell short hard. Philadelphia Fusion in that final four playoffs was tragically bad. So I want to see a different look for them, and hopefully some more of that consistency that we've really been hoping for from the Fusion. And then we just need to look at the backline. I don't understand, once again, why everyone's this right. Alarm Funny Astro is one of the best support lineups in the world, like that we have on any team. Alarm Rookie of the Year just played incredibly in his debut season last season. Just plays everything to a high degree, and you have to put him on par with a lot of the other top flex supports. Funny Astro, I think, is the best Lucio in the world. I chose an all-star and team that I could pick, and I put Funny Astro in there. I think his Lucio is incredible. His Brig and his Baptiste isn't as good as his Lucio, but they're still very serviceable at the highest level. So I do want to see some growth on those heroes from Funny Astro, but I think if you could put Funny Astro in your team, everyone would. So I think this is a great support lineup as well. Nothing's changed here. So my question to you guys, and I'd love to hear more in the comments of you guys who are saying that why is Philly in such a high tier? My question to you is, why are they in such a low tier for you? Where do you see the downgrade? I'm not even putting them top 3, top 4. I'm putting them top 7. Like, how are you putting them lower than that? So if you guys have ideas and thoughts of your own, make sure to shoot them at me, because maybe you're thinking of something that I haven't thought of. You never know. And then something that also needs to be highlighted here as well. They picked up 9K as a head coach. This is something we haven't even talked about. 9K is now coming onto this roster and is going to have massive impact. Coached under Krusty, he has a lot of respect within the community as being a great coach. Once again, you put a great coach into a mix of all these superstar individual talent, it's hard to really put them even lower. So my point stands. Obviously, Christopher, Moby Dick, and Seda staying on this roster. They were here last season. Christopher, I've heard from him a bunch of times. Seems like a really smart guy who just understands the game. He's been around forever. Seda, I think anyone would love to have Seda. He just understands the workshop better than everyone else, and will apply that hopefully to a lot of these teams. And Moby Dick, who I don't know a whole lot about, but has been here since 2019. And I think last season, Philly was the best season that we've ever seen from them, including 2018. Because in 2018, they had some ups and downs, and they just went up at the right time. While last season, they were consistently good across the entire season, except for at the final hours, which I think that's fixable. But showing consistent growth and consistent improvement throughout the entirety of the season is more important to me than just hitting the playoffs. And that's going to be it for the Philadelphia Fusion. They're going into the S tier. So then we need to talk about the next team, because there is going to be more teams in the S. I think I'm going to break this S tier video into 2 different videos. But I'm going to stay in the Eastern region, and I'm going to put the Seoul Dynasty. So the Seoul Dynasty is just another team, honestly very similar to Philly, in which they've been good for a long time. They're getting on a consistent rise, like trajectory. Obviously, Seoul Dynasty was expected to be one of the best teams in the league starting from day one, and they just never lived up to that height with the original lunatic high type roster. But they're making their growth, and we saw Seoul Dynasty make an incredible run in the playoffs on the back of Profit and Gesture, as they just always do. They even did it for the London Spitfire in 2018. And you can see where the individual talent is on this roster, and I think you have to put them in the S tier, just because I always doubt Seoul Dynasty's ability to perform, and then they just always do it. But I also think they're a more well-rounded roster. So let's have a look at this. So we jump into the Seoul Dynasty, and they honestly haven't changed a whole lot. So let's look at the classic. They have the Profit and Fitz DPS duo coming in again. They were very solid throughout the entirety of last season. One of the biggest problems I think that they had at certain times is if Fitz couldn't play that hit scan, then Profit felt like he had to play everything. You'd want him to play Profit in both roles. Fitz was an incredible hit scan. He's really taking it to the best, but he doesn't have a lot of anything else in it. His Sombra looked really good in the Nexus Cup that we watched recently, so he has that in his back pocket. But when you're talking about your like traces or any like unique flex DPS that some hit scans can play, he just doesn't really seem to have that in his wheelhouse. And then you add Sebiobi, and that is where Sebiobi is going to fit in. We saw it in the Nexus Cup, and we've seen it in the scrim that they played against Washington. Sebiobi has come in from time to time for Profit. I think we can all agree Profit should never be benched. I don't care what meta it is, Profit should always play on this Seoul Dynasty team. He's so good at everything, and he is the crux of this team that if you take him out, it's going to be really weak. The times I want to see Sebiobi come in, just when they want to play Sebiobi on Tracer so that Profit can play something else. In a non-hit scan meta, I want to see Sebiobi come in if the Tracer is the meta. Other than that, I really don't want to see too much SBB. We all love the guy, but I don't think he really has that level in him anymore on the hit scan or the Sombra that can compare to Fitz. And I don't think he can play anything better than Profit, except for maybe Tracer. And even then, it's like, I think I'd still prefer Profit Tracer, just for the flexibility of it all anyway. But if they need to have someone who can play Tracer next to Profit, I think that's where SPB fits that niche so well and is going to be very important. And then you obviously have the team captain dynamic and characteristics coming from SPB that'll probably elevate the team as well. So I actually kind of like the pickup. I just don't want to see SPB too much, because I think that you're going to see weaknesses, and we saw that in their just recent like sort of scrim matches and the Nexus Cup. Going on to the tank lineup, we have an off tank. Hallelujah. To is coming in, and he actually looked really good very recently in this Nexus Cup. I think Marvel was really good on that Sigma, but I think we can all agree Marvel Sigma is not like Marvel Diva. Marvel Diva was questionable to say the least, and that's when you need your to come in to play that Diva, to play these like signature off-tank roles that it's just very hard to adapt to. So glad to see to coming in here, looked good in the Nexus Cup. And then you have Marvel and Gesture splitting time on that main tank. I think it's a classic one of, I think Gesture will probably play the Winston, and whenever main tanks play Roadhog, I guess that's just a thing that's nice to have when you have Gesture. And then you have Marvel coming in to play that Orisa, Wrecking Ball, Reinhardt. And I think it's a very good level of temperament of Marvel's the more safe mainstay of the team. But if you just want to go ham, fuck it, throw Gesture in. He'll run it down mid, and he sometimes he feeds, sometimes he actually pops off and creates so much space, and that's why you see so much variability in how Seoul Dynasty have been playing. So I like the tank lineup. And now on the support is where the big question mark comes for me in this team. Creative, I wasn't super impressed with when he played for, who did he play for? Actually, just last season. He wasn't super impressive to me, but in this Nexus Cup, he was incredible. He was really good. I was very impressed with Creative and how he played, and what on Zen, he was just getting pick after pick. On Ana, he was really good. So Creative has simmered my worries down a little bit. So I'm actually pretty happy with him as the flex support. I think he can step up to the plate. Whether I think he's on the level and can compete with your alarms and your violets, not really sure yet. That's a hard thing to call. But the real weakness, in my opinion, comes from Animo. And I've been getting hit for this before. But when I said Toby, like obviously out of context, I said Toby was washed. That is not really what I meant. I said it, but that's not really what I meant. Is I understood why Seoul was moving away from Toby and going towards a better main support. Because if you want to be a winner of the Overwatch League, I just don't think Toby was like right there. He doesn't have as much impact. I could be wrong about that. He's actually been pretty impressive at certain times, and he has been great for Seoul. So maybe I'm wrong about that, and I take that back a little bit. Regardless of anything, Animo, in my opinion, was not the pick to replace Toby. I would take Toby over Animo any day of the week, because Animo, I think, was one of the hindrances for the NYXL. We don't know if this is just because of the strategy and the way he was told to play, but he's such a passive player. And he was there to sort of protect Jonak, kind of protect the president when he played for NYXL. But his Lucio, I would say, is these days one of the weakest in the leagues. And his Brig has looked okay, had some very questionable decisions from what we've seen recently. So in my opinion, this is Animo's opportunity to show to everyone and be like, hey, that is not who I am. The NYXL identity of how I played is not who I am. I can play on a great team. I can play on a different team, because Seoul is a very different team, an aggressive team at that. So Animo gets the opportunity to prove to everyone that maybe he isn't that main support, passive main support that we haven't really seen a lot of. So excited to see that from him, but that is where my reservations lie with this team. So I do want to talk about the coaches as well, because the coaching of the Seoul Dynasty has been a really interesting one for me. We've seen some really weird decisions of like Michelle not playing on off-tank, and then Marvel playing permanent off-tank, and then reducing their flexibility, and then people coming in at certain times, going back and forth on strategies, players playing at certain times. So they haven't made any adjustments this season. So we are probably going to see the same thing. I just hope that they've learned from some of their mistakes. Obviously, there's something there that works, because Seoul had a phenomenal playoffs run. They obviously can find their stride, but I do want to see some more consistency from this team, because it's hard trying to put Seoul anywhere when one week they can look like the best team in the APAC region and take it to like the Shanghai Dragons, and then the next day they lose to or have a close series to the London Spitfire. So I do want to see more of that, and just strong performances across the board, something that Philly's done very well. So obviously Changoon as head coach, MMA, and Bung Wuri as the assistant coaches, and Raccoon Panda as the analyst, and Dorong as the data analyst. Raccoon Panda is my new favorite name in the Overwatch League. So yeah, that's the Seoul Dynasty. So I think I'm going to leave it there, guys. I think we're going to break these next. I have 4 more teams. So let's have a look at this. 5 more teams. So we have 5 more. Actually, maybe I'll break. Oh, let's throw another one in there just for you guys, okay? Oh, no. Actually, no. I'm just trolling you guys. I just realized the 3 other teams are in the West. We're going to break down the West in the next video, so make sure to tune in that of the S tier for the West. So make sure to tune in for that. I hope you guys found this interesting. As I said, we have so much more information about these players, a bigger sample size to really be able to break this down a little bit more. And I hope you guys found it interesting. Let me know what you think, because I think Philadelphia Fusion and Seoul Dynasty are both a very interesting team that a lot of people have either rate very highly or rate very lowly. So do you think they should be in the S tier? Let me know. Call me an idiot, as all that good stuff happens in the YouTube comments. Love you all, and I'll see you soon.